go on this board and reported to this colonel and two lieutenant colonels there. And they said, Private Scott, do you know why you're here? No, sir, I don't have the least idea. Says, well, because you applied for OCS. I said, sir, I didn't apply for OCS. Says, we have your application right here. This lieutenant had filled out the application and signed my name to it and sent it in because he thought I was officer material. Okay. And so I went through the thing, and when I got through with it, like I said, here's a private, 19 years old, and never been in service before, and answering questions for these colonels and so forth. And impressed enough, I was, saluting and so on. And there, got through. The colonel said, talked to the two lieutenant colonels, says, okay, we've decided you're well equipped to go to OCS, so we're approving you to go to OCS. I says, what again is OCS? As Officer Candidate School. We're sending you to infantry OCS in Fort Benning, Georgia, because I was in infantry basic training, heavy weapons. And I said, okay. And they said, you'll be graduated as a medical service corps officer. I said, sir, I don't know what you're talking about. What's this medical service corps? Said, well, you have a year of pharmacy, pre-pharmacy, and so the medical service corps is the administrative branch for the Surgeon General. And I says, I still don't understand what all you're talking about. Didn't make any difference. They had already approved it. And so when I finished my basic training, they sent me off to OCS. First, they sent me to NCO school so I could be trained as an NCO, and then they sent me on to OCS. I was always pushing to them that you need to learn the principles of leadership, because the main thing is the responsibility. When you go over there, just because you're a captain and you're a doctor, you're going to be a commander. Not because you're trained to be, and not because somebody said, oh, you're a good commander. Just because of who you are and what your rank is, you're going to be a commander. And you're going to have men whose lives depend on you. When I went back to Vietnam for my second tour, and I had crashed in the first tour. Yeah. And, so when I went back in, and a friend of mine commanded the 498, and I flew in and landed, and I'm pretty sure I told you this before, but one of the helicopters was taking off, and the guys were sitting there in the door. They didn't have their safety harnesses on and all that. Mm-hmm. And I went up and told them to call them back, and grounded the aircraft commander, and told him until he learned how to take care of his troops. He was grounded. And then I called all the troops together, and I says, I'm the new commander. I'm taking command right now. I've got some primary things. Number one, our job here is to evacuate the wounded off the battlefield. You know what that is, and that's everything we're here for. That's the reason they sent all you over, the medics and the mechanics and the pilots and everybody else. And then I said, my personal goals are, number one, to evacuate the wounded off the battlefield as safely as we can do it. Number two is to get you home alive, because you're my responsibility. As long as I'm commanding this unit, you're my responsibility. You screw up, I'm going to come after you. But you excel, I'm going to reward you. Mm. And they all knew this. And I selected my platoon leaders, and I said, basically, that platoon's yours. You're the platoon leader. You're responsible for it. I'm going to hold you responsible for it. There was a doctor up there. He was a lieutenant colonel. And when he'd come in, he'd come down to 498 and meet me, and told me very frankly, I'm going to be a general officer, and I'm going to be in Surgeon Jones' office, and I want to be sure you're supporting my brigade. And it was the 173rd Brigade. And, and I told him, I'm full support. I'd send him helicopters up to take him out to visit the troops and so forth, gave me the support. And he was real close with the brigade commander, who was a brigadier general. And this lieutenant had gone out, and it was on a night evac, and the doctor had the radio in his quarters, the tent. And so he monitored it all, so he could, when there was evacs or something, he'd go up and meet them when they came back, and as a doctor, and take care of the wounded, and which impressed the brigade commander with him. And again, this guy was working hard to become a general, and he did. He became a general, but this lieutenant was pretty independent and a sharp guy, but pretty independent anyway. He got an evac, and he got the crew together, and they started to take off, and this doctor called him from his quarters and said, "Hold your helicopter, I'm going with you." And the lieutenant said, "Negative, we're taking off now." And he took off, and this doctor said, "I'm giving you a direct order, Lieutenant. You come back and pick me up, I'm flying with you." And the lieutenant said, "Negative, sir." And he went on to get the patients. And so the next morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, I got a call from this happened in the middle of the night. I get a call from this colonel, and telling me, "You got a guy up here, and I'm going to court-martial." He says, "You're not court-martialing anybody, Colonel. He works for me, not for you." And he says, "You all work for me." I said, "No, we support you. We don't work for you." And I says, "But you don't make any moves against that lieutenant." He said, "Well, I'm grounding him, and I'm doing." I said, "You're not doing anything. You don't command him, and you don't give him an order." And so I flew up there, got off, and went and talked to this doctor, and he said, "Well, you're undercutting me. I've got to be the leader here." And I said, "No, you're not. You're the doctor. You're the brigade surgeon. You have responsibilities and so forth, but you're not the commander of my unit." And he said, "Well, I'm filing court-martial charges against the lieutenant for disobeying a direct order." And I says, "Okay, I'm filing charges against you with your commander for giving a direct order, unlawful direct order. So you can't do it." He says, "You can't do that." And I said, "You try me. You'll see." He says, "You want to go see the brigade commander right now?" I says, "You're on shaky ground, doctor. You don't know what the hell you're getting into." So he backed off pretty quick. But then I says, "I tell you what, I will help you some. I'll let you save face a little bit, and I will bring the lieutenant back. He's not supposed to be up here anyway, because I told my platoon leaders, you don't need to be going out and sitting out in the field someplace. You have a platoon back here. You have all these men and all these helicopters that you've got to take care of, and you answer to me. So, basically, you don't need to be sitting out there when you've got pilots who do that work." And this guy had disobeyed me going out there, and which I got his rear end for. But anyway, I got him back and told him, "You go back and get somebody out here that's supposed to be here." And he never forgave me. His name was Jim Marash, and he thought I didn't support him. I says, "Son, who do you think flew up there and kept you from a court-martial and faced that doctor down and everything else?" And I said, "You were wrong in being up there. You were not wrong in disobeying his order, because he can't give you an order. And you were right in going out and getting wounded. That's what we're there for. We don't sit around and wait for anybody." And so Jim came back, and like I said, he never really forgave me for pulling him back from there, because he felt like that was disgraceful for him, and he couldn't see the leadership part of it. That, number one, he shouldn't have been there to begin with. Number two, he shouldn't have put himself in that position. And number three, the doctor was a brigade surgeon, and he had to save a little bit of face. So it's all part of leadership. But
there's one of the things I'm hearing. You talk about this. You talk about this officer who says, he announces himself by saying, "I'm going to be a general." And I mean, one of the things I'm hearing as you're speaking is, of course, if you're an officer, you're a major, you're a lieutenant colonel, of course you want to rise in your career and you want to have a successful career. I'm hearing you describe, though, there are at least two general ways of going at it. One is being career focused, and what needs to happen for me to advance in my career, and perhaps not really thinking about the impact on other people. And then what you're describing is, you're describing, of course I want to succeed in my career, but one of the ways to do that, one of the ways to do that is to take care of my people, right? Is to not to be so self-centered. One of the ways I can advance myself as an officer is by taking care of others, by looking out for the guys. But you talk about these guys in the helo, they're not buckled in, grounding that helo, coming down on them and saying, look, my job is to get you home safely, and so you need to buckle up, and you need to secure the patients that get on the helicopters. Does that make sense? I'm thinking of the person who is, and you see this not only in the military, you see it in other places, the person who is career-minded. What does it take for me to advance? And I'm not really thinking about other people. And then there's the other person who, of course, wants to succeed in his career or her career, but is thinking, okay, well, in the process of pursuing my career, how can I help other people? How can I look out for other people? How can I do what's right for other people? Does that make sense?
It's just like in civilian life. If you go into a company, you get hired, and you want to get promoted, then you do the things to do what the next job calls for, and you do them better than the next guy. Otherwise, they choose him. The biggest thing is that responsibility. I can't emphasize that enough. When they select you to do a job, they give you a responsibility, and that's your job right there. That's responsibility. It's not whether you get promoted, or it's not whether you wear your uniform pretty, or you're sexy to the girls, or whatever else, that's got nothing to do with it. It's your responsibility to take care of. It goes all the way from in a unit, running a good mess hall, see if the troops are eating good. And they're not always there, seeing that they have supplies and everything. When I got to the 498th as commander, we had a young guy, a specialist or something, sergeant or something, in the supply room. And as I started going through and inspecting things on this, I noticed the supply room, we didn't have nearly the supplies we should have had. And I started checking into it, and they said, well, we get them in, but they disappear. What do you mean they disappear? And I'm talking to the supply officer, who was inadequate. I later relieved him, but I said, what do you mean they disappeared? Are you sitting down there and checking to see where they go or what? Well, it turns out when I got checking around with some of the other enlisted men, the supply sergeant was loading them in a truck, taking them down to the village and selling them on the black market. So I came back, and I got one of my other platoon leaders, and a guy by the name of Mayo Ellickson, and I said, you take my Jeep, and you take a camera, and you sit there and you wait till that sergeant leaves this compound, and you follow him, and you get pictures. So he did. He followed him, went down to the village, unloaded stuff out, our unit stuff out of there that we used for evacuation and everything, and took it in, and Mayo took pictures, came back and says, Colonel, you were right. He took it right down there. I've got pictures of it and everything. I said, okay, go down there, and when he comes back with the vehicle, pull him over, put him under arrest. By my order. I'm court-martialing him. And so I court-martialed him. And the brigade, not the brigade, the group sent the guy out the officer out to run the court-martial. And so they called me in and asked me some questions. And I said, well, you've got pictures. You've got him on black market. Well, yeah, but there's extenuating circumstances. No. There are no extenuating circumstances that says you steal from the troops in this unit and sell it on black market. Nothing. I said, frankly, if it were up to me, I'd shoot him. And he looks at me. And so then a little bit, he came back and he called me back in. He says, I think I'm going to probably have to let him off extenuating circumstances. I said, you do, and I'll court-martial you. So you do have a duty to do. There's evidence, everything's right there. If you can't do your damn duty, get the hell out of my unit and go back and get somebody in here that can. And
Here's what I'm,
so they court-martialed the guy and
they did.
shipped him back to the States, demoted him, shipped him back to the States. But, you know, it's just little things like that. You get all the quirks of personality.
Yeah.
You get all the individuals that you've got to deal with each one as an individual. There's no two people alike.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. I mean, here's what one of the things that's interesting is you've described this, you know, sort of this confrontation with the colonel. You've described the helicopter pilot who held a grudge against you. You've just described the confrontation you've had here. In the previous conversation, you described a confrontation with a major who wasn't getting supplies to. And, you know, and so you've got all of that. And, you know, and all of that's there. And then I listen to the guys who served with you, and they speak of you with fondness and respect and admiration. So how do those two things go together? Because the person you're describing to me now is a very tough, kind of confrontational guy. But the guys who served with you...
In a way, a commander is like a father to them, you know?
Yeah.
You get all these young guys in, some of them don't have the least idea what they're doing there. You've got to develop them. You got to work with them. You know, and I built them a club. They enlisted them in a club. The officers had a club, but the enlisted men didn't. I built them a club. And I put one of our guys in there to run the club for them so that they have a place where they could go and have a beer when they were off duty and so forth. And go and have it sit. They didn't have to go sit in the barracks. So it was all... we had guard stations all around, and they'd be out there on guard, you know, and the edge thing, and they were Vietnam shooting at them and so forth. And I used to go out and at night and go up there, and I'd literally go up and I'd know who was on each station, and I'd go up and sit with them. They were scared to death. You know, you're sitting up there and somebody's shooting at you, and it's scary. And I'd go up and sit with them, and they used to come back and say, man, the old man came up there last night and sitting there shooting the bull with me. And
now this is when you were
Charlie was shooting at us, huh?
This is when you were a major?
No, this was second tour when I was lieutenant colonel.
The guys who are on guard around the perimeter, I'm guessing these are junior enlisted guys, right? These are E2s, E3s, maybe E4s, something like that, standing guard?
E4s, and you had a sergeant of the guard, and sometimes I'd take him with me, and usually I'd take him with me because, you know, and he'd stay down at the bottom of the guard station while I crawl up there with him. Yeah. And
well, so here's the thing, and because you know, I know nothing what it's like to be in a war zone, but I was peacetime Navy. As an E3 and E4, I mean, just the thought of having the thought of an 05 coming to where I worked, sitting down, talking with me, and showing any interest in me, not only did that never happen, I never would have thought it would have happened. I mean, and now you're prior enlisted, right? So I mean, you can understand that.
And it's an individual thing, you know.
Yeah.
That was my responsibility. When I took command of that unit, I took responsibility for those 200 and some odd people.
Yeah.
And, not just a couple of them. I took the responsibility for all of them. If I had some bad ones, I had one that was stealing from the other guys, you know. I had to deal with them. I had Don Conkright was a captain, and he was my wards officer. He was actually was the previous commander, and he kind of went into my unit, and he's a friend of mine, lives here in town, and so forth. But he came in to me one day and he said, Colonel, I'm a wards officer. I said, know that. He says, well, I've got a complaint. I says, what's your complaint? He says, I'm overwhelmed with wards. He says, since you got here, the guys all are writing up these things. Almost every flight, they write a ward, air medal or something. And I says, and what's your complaint? You're supposed to read them and evaluate them. If there's not something there, then you call them in and tell them it's not. But if there's something there, then you process the award. He said, well, you know, it's a lot of awards. I said, let me tell you something, Don. Flying medevac is one of the most dangerous jobs over here. I mean, we're flying without gunships. We're flying without weapons, so to speak. And you're flying in, and anytime there's people on the ground that are wounded, you can be damn sure there's enemies someplace that wounded them, and they're sitting there waiting for you. So I said, you're a shooting gallery. You know, you're going right into the middle of a shooting gallery. So for every flight they take off, I said, if I had my way, I'd give them a award just for taking off. But I says, you process them and you be lenient, because that's one of the few things that you can reward them with is an award for being in a combat zone and flying medevac and doing their job and doing it well.
Yeah.
And, so
he
reminds me of that to this day.
Yeah.
And recently we both belong to the Solar Pollen Society, and which is from Korea, but he was on a flight and he got some his windshield was hit by a weapon, and he got some scratches on his face and cuts. And so I was joking with him one day, and I said, well, where's your Purple Heart? He said, well, I didn't get a Purple Heart. I said, well, you should have. Who was your commander? He said, you know who my commander was. He didn't believe in that stuff. And I said, well, then I'll write one up for you, because I was your commander too, and we'll put it in now. He says, can you do that? I said, damn right you can do that. If you're a commander, you can do anything you damn well please. You take responsibility for it. So I got one of my Purple Hearts, and I wrote up, made up the thing, and I presented it to him. I says, it's a little late, and we'll send it in and get it put on your official record. Not you're retired, but I says, you know, if you're wounded in combat, it doesn't mean the bullet has to go right between your eyes. If it's just like me, I crashed and got injured, got burned, got this, got that, but and I got Purple Heart for it. And just recently, within the past year, I had gone to the Vietnam Wall, and I have a lot of trouble because I've got a lot of friends and some of my enlisted people on there, and I'd start to it and I'd get emotional and I'd start crying. And they have a virtual wall now.
Right.
And I got on the virtual wall, and I went down and I found the 3 guys that were killed in the crash on my first tour over there. Now, I never knew, and I could never find out whether they had gotten a Purple Heart. Because if I got a Purple Heart, they should have gotten a Purple Heart. And I've got pictures of them from the virtual wall. It had their pictures and where they're from and so forth, and had all the ribbons, and they did get a Purple Heart. All 3 of them that died in the thing.
I'm imagining you as an '05 lieutenant colonel, climbing up into that, you know, that security tower, if that's the right thing, to spend some time with that E3, that E4. And I've already said that, you know, I mean, when I was an enlisted guy, that would have been unimaginable that an '05 would ever sit down with me and have the slightest interest in anything I would have to say. So why? I mean, what was your motivation? Why did you do that? I mean, you know, that was your choice. What motivated you to do that?
You know, the basic belief, when people work for you, you train them. You make them better than what they are. If they're not willing to do that, if they're not doing their job, then you explain it to them why you're getting rid of them and give them a chance to do something more. If they don't want to do that, then you get them out and you get somebody in there, because if they don't do their job, they're risking other people's lives. And I used to always impress that on them. It's not just you. It's the guy sitting on the right of you and the guy sitting on the left of you. It's the guys living in the tent with you. You know, if you're not doing your job, you're risking their lives.
Yeah.
And if you're risking their lives, then I'm responsible for that. And I'm telling you, it's important to me. It's like when we had a helicopter go down any place, I was usually the first one in my helicopter out there searching for them. You know, and they always said that. Says, hey, we knew if we went down, Dust Off 6 was going to be right over us and looking for
that was you, your Dust Off 6.
Dust Off 6. And usually we found them. And the Dust Off 5 was Don Resloff, and he was an instrument examiner and so forth, because I had pushed him into his instruments when we were out at Fort Ord as officers in the unit out there. But he was one of the best pilots I've ever seen, and he was good. And I don't think you did Clarence Cooper.
Clarence Cooper, yeah.
We got him after he had a little heart defect. We got him through our flight surgeon, got him into our unit, and he ended up being a instrument examiner because we pushed him all the way through. And when I was in Washington, I didn't have my master aviator thing. You have to be 15 years and so many hours and everything, and you have to be instrument qualified. And Coop was an instrument examiner in the area, and he came up and gave me a 3-hour instrument exam over Washington, D.C., so that I would be have my master wings, which I wear with pride every time. And so those are the kind of guys you deal with, you know. And
yeah.
I'd give my life for them, and they would give their life for me. I guess that's the easiest way to put it.
Wow.
And it's more than just command and so forth. We're friends. Chuck Weldon, one of the mechanics, when we're sitting there talking over a beer at night, he says, you know, Colonel, he says, one of the things that always impressed me about you is that you made the platoon leaders responsible for their platoon, but you also regularly came down and you took flights. They'd get a hot mission and you'd come down and you'd bump the pilot and you'd take a flight. But not only did you do that, but you came down and you went over that helicopter with a fine-tooth comb to be sure that I was doing my job. He says, we appreciated that. You know, somebody appreciated what we did. He says, we look forward to you coming down and flying, even though you had your own helicopter and your own mechanic and everything. But he says, we knew you were coming down.
Wow. And this is Charles Weldon you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've had a conversation with him too. So
yeah. And Kerry Cunningham is one of our medics, and he's you know, like the first tour, there was times when because I had been a medic and been through Fort Sam and so forth and knew first aid and all that, but there's times when I was the aircraft commander, which meant left seat, and you have a pilot, so it was flying the thing. But there were times when the medic in the back would get overwhelmed with wounds and so forth, and I'd get out of my seat, crawl back there and help them with the wounds and so forth. And it's things I never thought twice about. I had another guy, a pilot that worked for me at Fort Sam when I was teaching, and he was a sergeant then, and I had talked him into going to flight school. And he was over there with the 498, and he was out flying one day, and I was flying high, and I always told him, I says, daytime, you don't go down below 1,500 feet unless it's to get a patient, because, you know, the higher you are, the safer you are. And so I was coming back from someplace, and I could hear him he had his mic was keyed. He didn't realize it, and he was talking, you know, and they came out, and they were flying along treetop level, you know, and he said, Colonel would really have my ass if he knew I was flying down here. And he said, but I know him from Fort Sam, and he says, he's the one that got me to go to flight school. He says, he ain't gonna do anything to me. And I keep my mic, and I says, Woody, your mic's open, and your ass is headed. And boy, you could have heard a pin drop all over Vietnam. And he did. The minute I got back, boy, he was standing at attention for my thing. You know, you risked that whole crew because of your stupidity.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. I mean, see, all of this, you're telling all of these stories, and of one, court martials and confrontations and all that. But it's not, it's not. I mean, here's what I'm getting. What's motivating all this is not, how can I ruin somebody's day today? What's motivating it is that you care about what's going on.
Yeah.
You care about what's going on. And if people are screwing it up, then you got to deal with it, because if you don't deal with it, then it's not going to work, right? And so and so, so now I'm getting an answer to the question that I had, because, you've kind of got the tough thing going on in the confrontation and everything that comes with being an officer when you're dealing with a lot of, younger folks. But why all these decades later is there still this admiration? Is there still this respect? And it's because it's pretty obvious that, where all that's coming from. And where all that's coming from is care. Yeah. And it's coming from concern, and it's coming from a desire not only to do a good job, but to do a good job for a reason, right? And the reason, you have two reasons why we need to do a good job. One, to get the wounded to a place of safety. That's one. And two, to get all you guys home safely.
The guys are like sons to me. Their wives are like daughters, and we just always stayed in contact. And
wow. Yeah. Well, Colonel Scott, I really appreciate you taking the time. And, there have been a lot of surprises. I've been interviewing veterans for over 20 years now. And, a lot of unexpected things have developed. But I think one of the real treasures for me is getting to know about this particular unit, the 498th, at a particular time in that conflict in Vietnam. And it's been a real honor to talk with you. It's been a real honor to talk with other guys in the 498th. I hope I'll be able to talk to more as time goes on. And it's an honor for me to be able to get some of these stories recorded so that, they become part of the historical record as well. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us, and thank you very much.
Yeah. I'd rather talk to you about somebody else than myself, but I'm glad you're doing this. And like I said, these guys deserve all the recognition they get. And
yeah. Well, I want to play a little part in that if I can. So
yeah.
Well, thank you very much, sir. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Good talking to you again.
Good talking with you. Take care.